Welcome to our show. You're listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections, a place to learn about and celebrate creative arts therapy. Each week, we'll explore new ways that music, art, and dance can reach, connect with, and help individuals of all stages of health and wellness. Hi, I'm Bree, Beynon, a board-certified music therapist and the managing partner for the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute. Tune in as I interview professionals from healthcare and educational backgrounds on the impact of the creative arts. If you prefer to watch our live video stream, simply visit www.pbmti.com. Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. My name is Bree Beynon. I'm a board-certified music therapist and certified neurologic music therapist working here locally in South Florida with the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute. If you're new to our program, you can expect to hear over the next hour, we're going to be shining a light on specifically today music therapy, but oftentimes we go into the community and find creative arts therapists or anyone who is using an outside-the-box creative approach to solve a common problem, to address a common issue, whether that's in healthcare or in education or even just in the wellness field. So we talk to dance therapists, movement therapists, art therapists. We have talked to, those that use comfort animals, people using sound healing, those that are using their gifts as a musician out in the field as a volunteer, just anything that's a little bit outside of that normal realm of addressing a healthcare issue and really recognizing the whole person, that whole mind-body connection. So if you have been listening throughout the month of June, you'll know that it is Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month. This is our last week. We've been doing a series this month, every week, highlighting the role of music and the creative arts when it comes to working with someone who has either a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or another a neurodegenerative diagnosis or a TBI perhaps. What role does music play in the care of that individual? I've also been talking about the effect of music on the well brain, which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. We all know the role of music in our own lives, whether it's getting us from point A to point B in the car or helping motivate us through a workout, listening to our favorite music, winding down at the end of the day with a favorite album, or making music for ourselves, doing a little songwriting or just playing our favorite instrument just to kind of collect ourselves, ground ourselves from the day. It does not matter where we're at in our lives. Every brain, every mind is affected by music in one way or another. But one topic we haven't specifically talked about yet this month that I think is really important is the effect of music on the caregiver. For those that are caring for, whether they live with this person or they care for a family member from afar, with someone with Alzheimer's diagnosis. And this is what we're going to be talking about today, specifically, even more specifically, about coping with when something like this happens to a young member of our family. You know, Alzheimer's it's kind of stereotyped to be an old person's diagnosis. And it just has been that for years. If somebody is confused, they're older, we kind of put that in a box. It's not that way anymore. And now we have this whole almost new resurgence of younger onset. And this has actually been in the news this week. We have lost a member of our sports community to this disease, to Alzheimer's, young, 62 years old, I believe. And so I wanted to take a moment to recognize that because certainly as it is a tragic and senseless loss, we're not used to hearing about someone this young, losing someone at this age to this diagnosis. It causes you to stop, to pause, and to realize that this isn't something we can just kind of say, oh, that's someone else's problem. You know, that's an elderly problem. That's a senior community problem. It's not. It's not. And again, if it's not something that's affecting you directly right now, odds are you know somebody it is affecting, and there's someone close to you that is affected by this diagnosis. It is just increasing. I don't have the facts in front of me right now, but a few weeks ago I read off all this research. One of them, I believe, it's every 6 seconds someone is diagnosed with this disease. So I wanted to make sure that I was on par with our local Alzheimer's Association when I share something about Pat Summitt, who was the coach for the Lady Volunteers in Knoxville, Tennessee. So this is a statement that they sent me today that they have released about the coach. The Alzheimer's Association extends sincere condolences to Pat Summitt's son, Tyler, extended family, many friends, and countless fans. Coach Summitt faced Alzheimer's disease as only she could, strongly and publicly. One of the greatest coaches in the history of sports, continued to be an educator and coach off the court, educating so many about Alzheimer's disease and rallying people to take action and become involved in the Alzheimer's cause, said Harry Johns, president and CEO of Alzheimer's Association. Coach Summitt was a courageous advocate for this cause. In honor of her struggle and the challenges faced by millions of Americans, we will continue to aggressively pursue greater awareness, support for families, and research that will slow, stop, and ultimately cure Alzheimer's disease. Locally, we honor the memory and courage of Pat Summitt, who helped bring needed national attention to Alzheimer's disease. We hope that her story shows that Alzheimer's is not just an elder disease, that it affects everyone. And again, I know that I say that a lot, and I'm almost belabor it, but it is something that really, it's like, hey, we talk about hospice care on the show. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, too. It's one of those words we don't want to talk about that has a stigma with it. Alzheimer's is that word. And until it is in the national attention like it has been this week, and we are facing it head on, it's going to continue to not be receiving the national attention it needs to get funds. It's not just to talk about it, it's to talk about it so we can raise money for research and for advocacy and to get attention in Washington and places that really need to know how this is affecting our community locally and nationally. So I just wanted to take a moment to mention that because it is Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month, but also because we are talking about how important it is to shine a light on this younger onset. My guest today, Stephanie Miller, she is a board-certified music therapist here locally with Trustbridge Health. And in addition to that, and the work, and she's going to talk about her work, and she does see patients with this Alzheimer's diagnosis. But in addition to that, she's also going to share her personal experience being a caregiver for her mom who does have younger onset Alzheimer's diagnosis, and what that process is like. And, I think it's an interesting perspective because it's not this happened years ago and she's learned all these things and she's here to tell you, what she wrote a book on. She's going through it now. And she's sharing with you very openly and very honestly, which I'm honored that she's here to do, what it's like going through it now and learning day by day what these changes are, how to recognize them, what to do. Maybe you don't always make the right choice in the moment, because how would you know? And what can you learn from that? So if you are someone who is currently going through this, I hope you listen today. I'm really excited that Stephanie is here to share with you all. I hope it's a comfort to you. If you have any questions for her, you can always call into the show, 888-565-1470. A funny note on that, the first time I did this show back in last week of September, the first time we ever had a show, and I thought, no one is going to watch or listen to this show other than my mom and grandma. I can't do a book giveaway. Who's going to call into the show? Nobody knows me, Someone called into the show. Someone won a book. It was Allison's Brain. We had Robert McMecken and Allison Woyawada speaking down from Ottawa, I believe, Canada, about their book that they wrote. I was so amazed. I was so thrilled. I don't know who this person, I didn't plan this. I don't know who this person is. They called in. I got to ship them off a book. So exciting. Small world. It's Stephanie. I didn't know her. And now she's here. Now she's here on the show. It's a small world. I love it. I'm so glad you're here to share it with me. So now you know a little bit about our topic today. I do want, before we get into the interview, as always, I want to share a little music to start us off. I love a good theme, especially when working with our seniors with dementia and Alzheimer's. A good theme can be very helpful to orient people to what is going on outside of the space they're in now. And one of the things that's going on this week is it is the 4th of July. So we have a long holiday weekend coming up. Lots of red, white, and blue, lots of flag waving, talking about summer memories, barbecue, parades, fireworks, while being sensitive to the fact that sometimes fireworks are not always a pleasant thing. For some, it can be a scary thing. So just things to be aware of as we go into the weekend. For some, it can be a big celebration. For many, it is. But always just checking in, especially with those that are veterans, and how they approach patriotic music and what comes up for them. But generally, this is a good celebration day. It's not as sensitive as maybe Memorial Day. We talked a lot about how to approach that topic. 4th of July is our country's birthday, so we can celebrate it like a birthday in most cases. So I wanted to share a patriotic song to head us into the holiday week. And I have found, we've done this one on the show before, but I've just found that this is a favorite for especially the seniors that we work with. A lot of times people say, I think this should be our national anthem. The national anthem is way too hard to sing. I think Irving Berlin got it right. And I've yet to meet someone who does not absolutely love God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to introduce you to Stephanie Miller, board-certified music therapist for Trustbridge Health. Thanks so much.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer. Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. It is the final week of our celebration, tribute, honoring Brain and Alzheimer's Awareness Month. We've talked a lot about how music specifically, and the creative arts in general, can impact those who are living with a neurodegenerative disorder, and also how music affects the well brain and is part of the wellness process, and how it affects learning as well. It affects all of it. So what we haven't talked about yet is the impact of music for the caregiver. And sometimes we get to experience that both in a professional light and in a personal light. And that is the case for my guest today. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us on the show. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
From the first ever caller to in the hot seat. That's really, really cool. So thank you for being here. I just kind of always start off by asking folks to share with a little bit about your background and how you came into the field.
Okay. So I've been in music for as long as I can remember. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old. My dad took me out and bought me my first piano. I started singing in choirs in elementary school, probably 4th grade. And then when I got to college, I didn't know what else to do except music. And I went to a very small school. Your options were music and music ed. So I majored in music, not really knowing what I would do with it. I thought, well, maybe I'll go work for a symphony or an orchestra, and that was kind of like a far-off dream, I guess, not really knowing what that took. And then after I got out of college, I started working for corporate organizations, and I spent several years doing project management type stuff, and came to a point where I said, you know, this isn't what I want to be doing. I'm sitting behind a desk. Like, it's just, I'm not happy doing this. And I was exploring, what do I want to do? I want to go back to school and I want to get my master's in something. What is that going to be? And I was really thinking counseling. So I was looking at counseling, and when I was in high school, I took voice lessons from somebody that was a music therapist. So at the time, I didn't know that she was a music therapist or anything. And a friend of mine who also took voice with her said, hey, have you thought about music therapy? You should go check out Julie Neal. She's a music therapist. And so I went and I shadowed her in the field. And she was working in a school with children with autism. And after leaving her classroom, I started doing research to see what populations can you work with? What is this music therapy thing about? And instantly I knew that that was really the way to combine my love and passion for music and my desire to help people.
Well, which population kind of stood out to you that you were particularly excited about?
I'll be honest with you, at the time, a lot of things did. I was like, oh, NICU, you can do NICU, you can do substance abuse, you can do this, you can do that. But the one population that didn't stand out to me was I never thought that I would be working in hospice care with Alzheimer's at that early stage. And here I am.
And here you are. So how can you describe, I know this is kind of two-part, what we're talking about today, your work experience, your personal experience. We'll start with work. So how would you describe your experience of using music as a tool to help those with this diagnosis?
Okay. So I've worked in both group and individual settings. I started my music therapy journey in a private practice, working mostly in memory care facilities, assisted living, independent living, doing group work. And I was doing groups for people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and I was really using it as a tool for socialization, a tool to bring people together and bring people out of their bubble, the best that I could do that in the group work. The group setting. And so I was doing sing-alongs, I was playing musical games, maybe doing some trivia mixed in with the music, you know, like who wrote this song, or who sang this song, or, you know, what movie is this from, what show tune, you know, things like that. And now I work for Trustbridge in hospice, and I'm providing care one-on-one to individuals at end of life. And a lot of times I see Alzheimer's and dementia. And it's a little bit different than what I was doing in the world of group work, because my goals are just different. I'm not necessarily looking to socialize as I am looking to do socialization, but in a different sort of way. I'm looking for comfort, and I'm looking for, you know, reminiscence and life review and things like that in the end of life.
And it seems to me, too, and having also been kind of on both sides of that, when we're approaching someone in an individual setting, yes, socialization maybe to us, you know, socializing them to the music therapist is part of it. There's often something else going on as well with that, right? Another comorbidity or maybe a family coping issue. So what are some goals that you might address in that setting, in a hospice, in a one-on-one setting?
So you might address pain management. You might address ineffective breathing. You might address just reminiscence. This person is, at the end of their life. A lot of times you're addressing a connection with a family member because, that person is at a point in their disease process where it's hard for them to connect with their family. And music can be a really powerful tool to build that connection because the music kind of serves as a gap to connect us in a way that we might not be able to otherwise.
And you know what? It's kind of ironic because the point that I'm just said that I'm focusing on, I've already gotten away from, because in my mind, as you're talking, I envision a circle or a room of 90-year-olds, and we're playing songs from the 20s. I just did it. I literally just said when I was like, let's not do this, and I played a song from the 20s. Great job, Bree. Playing the songs from the 20s, 30s, 40s, that's the kind of what we imagine we would do. That's not one size fits all.
Right.
So do you work with clients who are younger with this diagnosis? I
do. I just saw a client today that is 65 years old, I believe. And so I'm doing a lot of music from the 60s. I'm seeing that more and more. Yes, I still see the people that were doing the music from the 20s and 30s, but more and more I'm saying we're doing music from the 50s and the 60s and, sometimes even the 70s. And that just goes to show that we're dealing with a younger population. We're not having people that are just in their 80s and 90s. I saw another patient today that his onset was in his mid-50s. He's now in his 70s and been, dealing with this disease for 20 years, but those signs and symptoms started in his 50s.
Do you think approaching a session with someone in their 50s or 60s, do you approach that differently than you would with the same diagnosis of Alzheimer's? You see that, you get the information, that is the diagnosis, they're obviously in the end stages if they're in hospice care. What is the difference in your approach to someone that is younger than someone who is maybe in their 90s?
There are a lot of similarities because, you're still dealing with the same diagnosis and they're at end of life. But, your music is obviously going to be different, so you have to be sensitive to that. And you have to be sensitive to the individual. And I think that's with everything that we do. But, understanding that this person is in their 50s or 60s and how they might have grown up, what the family dynamics are like. And I don't do that any differently with the 90-year-old person. But the sensitivity to their age and how they grew up and the music and the things that they like has to come into play.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's part of exactly who the individual is. And one thing that comes to mind for me is, like you just mentioned, those family dynamics. Someone in their 50s and 60s could very well have, young adult children and parents. And oftentimes they're not here alone, whereas someone who's older may have come here alone to retire and their children aren't here. This person may have been they are the sandwich generation, looking out for their kids, taking care of their parents, and now have this diagnosis. There's a lot to that.
Yeah, and the family dynamic is very different because sometimes with our older generation, people in their 80s or 90s, they might not still have a spouse. Maybe they do, but what we're seeing is that oftentimes, my 60-year-old patient today, her spouse comes 3 and 4 times a week and is having a very hard time coping with the decline and the diagnosis. And that's something that we have to be aware of and sensitive to.
Sure. Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, is the patient you're referring to, is she in a facility? Or
she is. She is. Facility.
So that's another thing that I think is difficult, because who thinks about moving into a assisted living or a skilled nursing facility when you're 60?
Yeah.
It's not easy for anybody, certainly to move from your home, but at that age, when you look around.
And I think that's the challenge, because there aren't a lot of people that are that age in facilities.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing it more and more, but the challenge is that a lot of times they might feel more isolated because there's nobody their age. There are people that are 20 and 30 years older than they are.
Yeah. I remember in my time in this work visiting someone who was younger with a Parkinson's diagnosis, and he never went to programs because he was younger. And he's like, I want to listen to the 70s. I don't want to go to this group and sing Glenn Miller. I don't want to. It's not my music. It doesn't speak to me. And so he did benefit from that one-on-one because he was very isolated to his room. I don't have anything to talk about with these people. So there's just so much, I think, to consider. when you're addressing the whole person. I mean, the age is one part of it. There's a lot that's part of their culture, definitely. And so we're talking about the family dynamics, and that involves a whole different side to caregiving, because again, we're involving younger adults, and maybe their parents are still living, and maybe their parents were relying on them for care. How do you see music being a comfort to the caregivers on both ends?
I think that just like it is a caregiver to you and I as musicians and music therapists, and it's a comfort to our patients. I had a caregiver at a facility just today. I just noticed that while I'm working with the patient, they're sitting on a recliner and they look really relaxed. And I get done and I said, hey, I'm going to be talking about this later, and I said, can you tell me a little bit about what music does for you? And the caregiver says, oh my gosh, I'm so relaxed. I'm so at peace. And what I see, I think, is our caregivers have to be on all the time, because they have to be cooking and they have to be feeding and they have to be changing and they have to be trying to figure out ways to provide socialization and stimulation. And sometimes during our music therapy visit, that might be their 30 minutes to just chill for a minute. It might be their 30 minutes to handle some business that they might not get to handle during the day because they're so involved in caring for somebody else.
Absolutely. I remember that was always when the daughter of a patient I would see would go to the grocery store. Like, I've been waiting all week for you to come, and certainly there were volunteers and other people working as part of a team, but I remember what an impact that was. Like, I'm so glad I know, mom's going to have a great time, but I don't have to worry about it and worry about it, So that's, they might not even be there for the music and benefiting, and it just gives them a little bit of a break. What are some of the challenges? I mean, you just kind of said their roles. Their roles are endless. Their minds are never stopping. They're always thinking about the next thing. I mean, how do you see that affecting a caregiver?
I mean, I think it affects them physically because they're constantly up and doing and giving of themselves. I think emotionally, trying to constantly be on the go and give of yourself. It's similar to, in our field, we're constantly giving to other people, and we need to understand our limitations and have good self-care practices. And I think caregivers need the same, because they sometimes are there for 12-hour shifts as caregivers, or sometimes people that are caring in the home are there for 24 hours and they don't ever get a break. And it's understanding what are my limitations and how can I care for myself. And that's hard because sometimes they don't get a break to care for themselves.
Sure. Absolutely. And that's another tool that we can help, share with them. While you were out, I realized that this was really a special song, or I could tell this was an artist that helped. Maybe this is something you play, and maybe I can help you find them on YouTube or an album, and so you can get a chance to relax and even just enjoy that moment together. It's, I try to focus on this show, especially as we're talking to people that obviously you're not going to have access to a music therapist 24/7.
Right.
What are tools that people can take from things that we've observed and to use in their own home outside of the session after we leave, So that's awesome. We're going to take a short break, a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Stephanie, not so much about her work experience, but her personal experience in this area as well. Stick around.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer, Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com, engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. I have with me tonight my guest, Stephanie Miller. She's a board-certified music therapist with locally here in Palm Beach County with Trust Bridge Health. Thank you again so much for being here, Stephanie.
Of course.
The first half of our interview, Stephanie was talking about her work in hospice care and also doing groups for socialization and memory care units, and how that group versus individual, how she saw music as a benefit to those with this diagnosis, not only to the patient themselves, but also to their family members. And when it comes to younger onset diagnosis of Alzheimer's, which is what we're kind of focusing on today, what the unique considerations are when you look at the family patterns, if they have younger children, if their parents are still living, where are they living? When they look around a room, if they're in a facility, do people look like them? Do they have the same interests? Do they have the same musical interests? These are big things that can affect a person. I mean, even something as simple as having the same musical interests of everyone around you. Think about that. If you went to live somewhere and you couldn't share that, you couldn't bond with people around you that shared these things that really brought you a lot of joy. So this is a benefit to having a music therapist who come in and bring that to decrease that risk of isolation, that social isolation that can come from not feeling like you have a connection to others through things like music. But your connection to this diagnosis goes deeper than this, which I imagine has given you even more of a sensitivity to it. So I wondered if you would just kind of share with us what your personal experience is.
Sure. I would say about 3 years ago, my mom was in town. She lived out in Las Vegas and was visiting, and started to notice that she was asking a lot, where are my keys? Where are we going? What day is it? Simple things. And, at first you might think, or we thought that, I don't know, maybe she's just having some memory problems. It happens to all of us. It happens to me. Sure. And then she was at work. She worked in human resources and had to travel a lot for work in terms of, walking from place to place. And it became an issue where her work said, you need to see a doctor, because she was forgetting where she was going. Forgetting where she was going. It was just really hard for her to function in her job. And she went to see a neurologist, and that neurologist told her that it's not, it's just maybe a lack of oxygen to the brain. And so we thought, maybe hook her up to some oxygen and that might solve the issues. And less than a year ago now, I would say last September maybe, I guess right prior to that, she had been diagnosed with a mixed dementia. They called it multifactorial dementia. We weren't quite sure exactly what that meant. I got online, looked it up, and I think that's kind of a category for we're not sure what it is. It could be vascular, it could be this, but right now we're just going to call it that.
I'm sure many people listening have been in that situation. Yeah.
And then around September, she went to see another neurologist. And this neurologist finally did a PET scan and determined that she has Alzheimer's.
So that was the test that confirmed that. Okay.
And I can remember where I was, what I was doing when I got that phone call. She was living with her sister in Virginia at the time because she had moved back to Virginia so that she'd lost her job and had to...
As a result?
As a result of her disease. Or what was going on that we didn't know was a disease at that point, and had to move in with her sister because she had nowhere to live and no income, and had to figure out, let's figure out what's going on with me medically. And we thought, maybe we can figure out what's going on with her medically, and then we can get her back in the workforce or whatever it might be. I was at work the day that I got the phone call. I was teaching some lessons, and I saw my aunt had called me like 3 times, and I was like, what's going on? And she called me and told me that my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And for me, I already knew that there was something going on, and I had gone through the grieving process as much as I could with that. But something about hearing the word Alzheimer's for me was more scary, devastating. Like, you know, even though dementia and Alzheimer's are very close cousins, if you will, there was just something about that word.
Sure.
And so she's been diagnosed for, I guess, let's say 8 months now, even though we've known something was going on long before. And I'm just starting to experience what it's like to have to care for her. I'm facing the outlook of being her power of attorney and of figuring out what's going to happen for her future, where she's going to live, who's going to care for her.
And her age?
She is 57.
And what age did the signs start? You said those.
I would say around 55 was about when her signs started. Yeah.
So obviously, and it is very raw. You know, as I was sharing in the beginning, this is not something that I've lived through this and I have all the answers. We're going through it. You know, day by day.
Yeah.
8 months in. What are some things that you observe? What are some changes that you observe?
I observed her motor function. You know, it's hard for her. I noticed like reaching for things. Her depth perception is just, you know, out of whack, if you will. It's hard for her just to do simple tasks. Making a sandwich for herself. She loves peanut butter sandwiches. It's hard for her. She can do it, but it's kind of like having a young child make their sandwich because there's stuff everywhere. It's messy. You know, I noticed that her gait, you know, it's harder for her to go up and down stairs. It's walking can be a challenge. She can walk, but it's a challenge. And I notice it's amazing to me, some memories are just right there, and then other times it's so hard for her to come up with a word. And she notices that. She feels that.
It's interesting, too, as we're working with clients that are going through this, I think that we tend to be more sensitive because that's our work life, and we see their diagnosis on a paper, and we know we're there to help them. And when people in our lives are going through changes, it's hard to stay in that moment. Do you find that? And but why are you struggling so much with this? You know, we forget.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've said, you know, to myself and to my friends and family sometimes, you know, I all day, every day, pretty much see people with Alzheimer's. I see a lot of that, and I can work very effectively as a music therapist, but that's why they say you can't treat your family. You can't be therapist to them. You can't, you know, because, you know, I know what helps my patients, but it's hard knowing what helps my mom. You know, that's an everyday struggle. And though she's not living with me and I'm not having to care for her 24/7, I'm involved in trying to figure out what's going to help her, what is going to stimulate her. And it's challenging because, you know, she doesn't like X, Y, and Z. And so it's figuring out what does she like. And then there are limitations because she likes to be outdoors and travel and go places. And this disease has been a limitation because now she can't do those things by herself as much anymore.
Absolutely. We're talking earlier about the differences in kind of approaching the situation. Again, recognize that everyone is an individual, but in general, from someone who is older, maybe years into their retirement and kind of been settling down into a lifestyle, to going from being across the country by herself in a job where she was obviously very independent, traveling by herself, having a good relationship with her work, to that loss. To no fault but the diagnosis, you know, to that loss, to having to surrender that independence of going to live with your aunt and the loss that comes with that of, you know, how do you see her coping with that?
You know, she's struggling because she has said to me before, she said, I'm miserable. I have no independence. Like she said, it's like somebody is constantly standing over my shoulder watching me. And it's true. People are, because we're afraid, I think, of what's going to happen to her. You know, we have had instances where she's gone out for a walk, and in theory, she can go for a walk by herself. And there have been times where she's gone for a walk and she gets turned around and doesn't know where she is. And then she's lost. And suddenly, you know, we're having to go out and look for her. And that's scary for her because she's in a moment of panic. And so, you know, I try for a moment to put myself in her shoes and say, what would it be like to lose your job, be given a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, have to move in with your sister, lose all of your independence, I can't imagine what that's like. You know, for a second, I can think of what would it be like if I couldn't have my independence.
Sure.
But, you know, I'm not the one with the diagnosis, and I'm not the one that has somebody standing over my shoulder watching me.
Right, right. It's hard enough to even think about, you know, I try to put myself in the client's or patient's shoes when they lose their keys. That's hard enough. You know, when you think about it, you just can't even get in your car and go wherever you want.
Yeah.
But to compound all of these losses, it's challenging. And it's, I mean, do you find that having the experience in your work, is that helping you in this situation? Is it hindering? I mean, what is it like going between the two situations?
You know, it helps me in that I have a sensitivity already, and I have an awareness of the disease and what the disease process looks like. So my mom having Alzheimer's, it's sad, it is, but I'm very aware of what the disease is going to look like down the road. The hard part is in these early stages, especially at early onset, because, you know, she can't quite care for herself, but she's in this strange limbo stage where it's not time for us to put her in a locked facility. That's not what she needs. But we also have to consider that she's so young and she doesn't have a spouse, and even so, her being so young, you know, her spouse in theory might still be working, you know, but she's living with her sister who's working full time and has a family to take care of. There's a possibility of her coming to live with me and I'm working full time, and, you know, am I really equipped to be a full-time caregiver? And I have to ask myself that question. And the answer right now is I'm not. And so let's figure out what is an alternative solution between a locked facility and her being completely on her own. Yeah.
And kudos to you for having that self-awareness of knowing your limitations. I think as those of us that are in the helper fields, we tend to take on the world because that's our lot in life, or at least that's the lot in life we've deemed for ourselves. And it's hard to set those boundaries and to say, this is what I can do and this is what I can't. And really what it comes down to is, what can I do to be the best helper, caregiver, whatever that word is, for my loved ones? You know, and sometimes it takes a little problem solving to do. So kudos to you for that. Do you find that since the diagnosis, has it affected your work, the way that you approach? So we kind of talked about how work might affect your relationship with your mom, but since learning about the diagnosis, when you are working with patients with Alzheimer's, do you, the term we throw around in therapy is that transference, that fear of transference, do you notice any of that?
You know, when my mom was first diagnosed, I absolutely did. You know, that day, I wasn't in a position where I could have time to process, and so I went probably within a half hour and did a group at a memory unit. And I was choking back tears because, you know, every person I looked at in that room, I said, well, that's my mom in who knows how many years, and that's my mom. And, you know, the therapist in me said, Stephanie, you can't go there. Like, that, you know, the human in me said, well, you know, that's natural for you to go there. And, you know, I spent probably the next few weeks questioning, you know, can I work with this population? You know, is it too close for me? You know, am I ill-equipped now because now I have somebody going through this process, the disease? And it really took me going through a journey to figure out how do I balance both of those? And I got to a place through counseling and through self-care where does it play a role? Yes. You know, when I saw the 65-year-old woman today, there was a moment where my brain said, you know, that's going to be my mom. And I'm okay with now saying that's going to be my mom. Not okay as in I'm, you know, but I've gone through a grieving process, and I continue to go through that grieving process. And as my mom declines, I will go through that process. But you know, I've gotten to a place where I can work effectively. And sometimes it does, you know, affect my work in the respect that I can now have a more personal and caring view in the respect that I can say, you know, this could be my mother sitting here, and it literally could be in a few years. I think we can all imagine what would it be like if that were my family member. But literally, I know that my mom is going to be there in a matter of years.
I think a lot of us come to this work because we have been through this in some way with a parent or a grandparent or a sibling, and we do have that sensitivity. It was almost reverse kind of, or at least the same exact timing for you, which I think is an interesting process. But you you know, just being aware of that need for self-care and whatever that means for you, I think is just, it's going to help you take it moment by moment, which I can see that you do. You're living in the moment and finding the way that you can be the best in both situations. Thank you for being so open and honest. I think this conversation will touch a lot of people because it's not something that people want to talk about. So the fact that you were brave enough to share your story, I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. We've got a couple good friends of the show that if you haven't listened in the past, you probably recognize them. Elisa Avon and Tammy Leem, both also Trustbridge Health employees, also do work for PBMTI, so we see them a lot. We love to have them around. We're going to be talking about the concert that we just did, the benefit concert up in Orlando to benefit Equality Florida, and going to share a song with you that we did this weekend on Saturday. So we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll see you after that.
Mom's fall was a wake-up call. We knew she needed help, but we also knew she'd never leave her home.
With jobs and kids, we can't always be there. We weren't sure who to trust to help around the house and make sure she takes her medications.
We did our research and found our answer, Bright Star Care. Their home care teams are led by registered nurses, with help available 24/7.
Thanks to Bright Star Care, Mom can stay where she wants to be, at home.
For a standard of care that raises the bar, call 844 for Bright Star.
The Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute is a professional music therapy practice serving medical, community, and educational settings throughout Southeast Florida. With our experienced team of 11 board-certified music therapists, we use music and research-based therapeutic interventions to help individuals of all ages and abilities reach their goals and increase their quality of life. For more information on our services and programs, please visit our website at pbmti.com. Engage with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or call us at 561-747-9944. You are listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. If you'd like to join the conversation, the toll-free number is 888-565-1470. Now back to the show. Hello, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You're listening to and watching Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We've been talking today to music therapist Stephanie Miller about her personal and professional experience with those diagnosed with Alzheimer's, specifically those with younger onset diagnosis. Again, thank you, Stephanie, so much for sharing your story. I'm kind of still in the moment of that. So really, really appreciate that. Switching gears slightly, you have heard me talk the last couple weeks since the tragedy in Orlando, just 2.5 weeks ago now, that I and my friends, like many of you, woke up Monday morning feeling a bit helpless, not sure where to put that energy, not wanting to contribute to negativity and sadness that was so abundant, and how to do something positive. So, really born out of just a lot of love and kindness in Facebook, we put together a benefit concert that started out as Elisa and I saying, hey, what can we do? Do you think people will come to a concert? I'm going to pull this mic down for you. And by noon that day, a lot of people showed interest. We had about 18 different acts from music therapists and others, songwriters that were not music therapists and singers from all over the state. Most of us outside of the Orlando area that traveled to Orlando for this concert, and we had about 50 in attendance. Over 1,000 have watched the live stream, Facebook Live, which we've reposted, several of us. So if you are watching and you're friends with us on Facebook, or you can reach out if you want a link to it, we can certainly send that to you. Wow. Every act, just powerful, incredible. 3 original songs written, I know at least 2 of them were written specifically for the tragedy in Orlando. One of them, our friend Trent, who's also been on the show before, wrote that morning before we left. Incredible. Made us all cry like a million times. And we raised total, including money that people sent for us to get there and for us to have food for the attendance, over $500. 411 of those dollars that went directly to Equality Florida. And Lisa, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about what Equality Florida is doing? What are they raising funds for?
So Equality Florida has a GoFundMe page that was created after the shooting in Orlando, and they have been raising that money to help the families of the victims pay for medical costs if they're survivors, pay for counseling and things of that nature, and also funeral costs. They're not cheap either.
No.
So any bit of money is helpful. I think I recently looked at the GoFundMe page, and it is now up to over like $6.5 million that have been raised so far just in the past 2 weeks. So a large amount of money, and we were able to contribute in a small way to that. So it's wonderful.
Absolutely. It's just, boy, I've been processing it ever since. But, one thing my mom said is, so look what you guys did, and the energy that took, and how much more energy it could have taken to do something angry, or something negative. Yeah. And instead we took that and did something really positive. And it just goes to show you, I mean, it's a choice to make. Yeah. It's a choice to make, and I feel so proud to be surrounded by wonderful, literally surrounded. You can't see Tammy over here. I promise she's here. There she is. Watching. She's got her keyboard set up back there. And this is just one of the songs that we did together. This song is called One Voice. So that everyone can hear your beautiful one voice. So we've got Elisa Avon, Stephanie Miller, myself on vocals, and Tammy Lim on the keyboard. Here we go.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one who makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. Sound of me singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices three, singing together in harmony, surrendering to the mystery. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of one voice, one people, one voice, a song for every one of us. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for joining us. What am I forgetting to talk about from this weekend? I mean, we have about 2 minutes left. So we talked about Trent's song, wrote that morning, just came out of it. We had Linda Knutson, who is a local singer-songwriter from Orlando, connected through another music therapist from the Orlando Gay Chorus, who wrote this song. 2 titles, We Are Orlando and also Pulse of Love. Oh my gosh. Please look up Linda Knutson, Knutson, right? She has an album out. She's on iTunes. She's got her song on SoundCloud. Beautiful. This was the first time she'd ever performed it. She said, perhaps the last. Came out to do it for our event. Linda, we love you. Thank you. That was so kind to do it. It just made the event that much more special, especially having someone from that community who felt it so deeply. The outpouring of love that we had it just goes to show you, love wins. It does. It's hard to get caught up the other way, but it does. Love wins. I'm listening to the song as we sing it, and it's on our topic as well. We're not alone in this. As we're caring for our patients, as we're caring for our loved ones, our family members, we are more powerful when we are together. So thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you, Stephanie. You're wonderful. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to Palm Beach Music Therapy Connections. We hope you enjoyed today's program and discovered new ways to bring music, art, and dance into your home or workplace. Please find a copy of today's show at pbmti.com. If you have any questions for our guest or myself, please email me at Bree, that's B-R-E-E, at pbmti.com, or call the Palm Beach Music Therapy Institute at 561-747-9944. Tune back in next week for an all-new live show. See you then.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.